Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Tech Your Business podcast. Once again, this is a guest episode, so I'm sure we've had a lot of that of recent. So I have a guest on the show today. Today's guest is Michael Israel. Michael is the head of Field Service Evangelism at Zuper, and today he's going to speak with us about topics like automation, digital transformation, and things like that. So welcome to the show, Michael.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm very much looking forward to this.
Tell me a bit of what you do, number one. Then Field Service Evangelism. That's I've not heard of that before. So you tell us a bit of what that is too, and what Zuper does as well.
Yeah, it's kind of a unique title. Well, let me start by answering your last question first. And what does Zuper do? Zuper is a provider of software that is specifically designed for managing field service organizations and the people that work in those organizations, such as service technicians, field engineers, customer service engineers, essentially people that go out into the field and work on something. And that something could be anything from mowing the lawn at a house or taking care of the landscaping at a business park, all the way up to taking care, installing, maintaining, calibrating very, very sophisticated equipment such as surgical robotic arms in hospital surgery rooms. Just to finish up, Zuper is a provider then of software for organizations that have a field force of some kind or another. And to answer the first part of your question, as the head of evangelism, I should say, for field service at Zuper, my role is to help across the company. I spend a lot of time helping the sales organization with getting some deals identified and closed. I help with marketing content. I help direct the direction of the product, the roadmap for the product. I do a wide variety of things. You might say I'm a jack of all trades in the Zuper organization, and that's because I've worked in field service for literally over 50 years. I've been both on the operations side, managing teams of field service technicians, and I've worked for some of the premier software companies that offer field service software.
Wow, I never heard of Field Service. An app for field service, and so this is definitely going to be a really interesting conversation. So when you said field service is like maybe plumbers, electricians, and people that go out in the field to work in different
Correct.
locations and cool. So what does the Zuper app do for these people or for these companies they work with?
Oh, a wide variety of actions and features and functions. So to just start with the very basics, we keep track of all the customers that are being serviced by the field service organization. We keep track of all the equipment that is installed at the customers that are being serviced. We keep track of the people that work in the field service organization, that is the technicians, the field engineers. We know what their skills are. We know what their certifications are. We know what their work hours are. We keep track of the costs that are involved in delivering service to a customer. For example, when a field service engineer goes out to, let's say, fix a point of sale system, just as an example, at a convenience store, there's a cost for the labor for that person. There's a cost for the parts that the person has to use to repair the piece of equipment. There's a cost for the travel time. So we keep track of all those costs, and even perhaps more importantly, or at least equally importantly, we keep track of the revenues that are associated with delivering the service. So if the service is being provided on a time and material basis, in other words, the customer is going to pay for it, for the service that's delivered on an individual basis, we know what those revenues are. If the customer has a service contract or an extended warranty, we know what the revenue is associated with that service contract or extended warranty. So we're able to keep track of the profit or loss for delivering service to a customer. We keep track of the spare parts inventory that's involved. So technicians in most cases need to use parts to repair pieces of equipment, and we know where those parts are. We know how many of them are in the technician's van or in a warehouse. We know what the costs are for the parts. So that's just kind of touching the surface. We really keep track of anything and everything having to do with providing service on site to a customer.
All right, so that's really wonderful. really wonderful, especially with your explanations. It shows that your app does actually a lot that some companies might not think they need, like tracking those times, the costs, and everything.
Yeah,
It's
it's very interesting.
amazing.
Oftentimes when people ask me what I do, when I tell them, well, I work in field service, the most common question I ever get is, what's field service? And I just tell people, look around, just think about it. The person that comes to your house to repair your water heater, to repair your air conditioning system, that's field service. The person that comes and mows your lawn, that's field service. The person that goes to a business to fix the lighting system in a business, that's field service. The person that goes to a hospital to repair oxygen delivery systems, that's field service. Field service is anything that involves somebody going out into the field to do something. That's field service.
All right. So, can you share some success stories or maybe case studies of businesses that have benefited from adopting your digital field service management solutions?
Sure. I mean, there are many, many case studies across many, many industries. I think, generally speaking, the primary benefits that organizations, whether they be small or large, will benefit from and have benefited from is the ability to keep track of the costs and the revenues that are associated with delivering field service so that they can determine whether or not they need to hire additional field service people, if they need to train the field service people better, if there's a piece of equipment, for example, or a type of piece of equipment that's failing often, then that failure data can be gathered and reported back to manufacturing and engineering so that manufacturing engineering can come up with an engineering change, for example, to make sure that the product is not failing as often and therefore not costing as much money to service. The ability to know exactly what technicians' skills are, what are they trained on, and where are they located, and what does their day look like? How many service calls do they have today? So that they can route the technicians in the most efficient and most appropriate way to make sure that a technician is dispatched and assigned to a service call and that technician has the right skills in order to be able to fix the problem, as opposed to sending someone that doesn't have the right skills. To be sure to know that the technician has a time slot available this afternoon so that we can assign the technician to a service call, say between 2 and 4 this afternoon. Those are the kinds of benefits that the technology of field service software delivers to organizations, and that relieves organizations of trying to track all of that information manually using spreadsheets and whiteboards and other more antiquated methods. So the benefits are really, really widespread, not only from a cost and a revenue standpoint, but also from a productivity and efficiency standpoint in making sure that service is delivered on time and is delivered accurately and thoroughly.
So, are there specific features or functions within your app that have proven particularly valuable to businesses?
Yeah, there are probably several. I think one that kind of stands out to me that I think many of our customers really, really like is the ability to define custom inspection checklists and problem diagnostic and resolution checklists. So, for example, a customer who's working on let's say, a lathe machine in a manufacturing plant, a machine that's cutting metal, for example, they can put together a checklist for the technician that says, when you get there, before you do anything, take these safety steps. And they can define exactly the safety steps that the technician must take before they start working on the device. And then, moreover, they can say, all right, now that you've completed the safety check these specific pieces of equipment inside the lathe machine to make sure that they are aligned properly, to make sure they are calibrated properly, that kind of thing. So customers can define very specific steps, if you will, that a technician must take in order to be safe, in order to diagnose the problem correctly. And once they've diagnosed the problem correctly, they can define the steps that must be taken to correct the problem. So inspection and checklists for work orders and even for specific pieces of equipment are a very valuable feature that Zuper offers, and it's inherent and built into the product. There are many other examples as well, but I think that's one that kind of stands out to me, and has we've seen that as a very important feature that many of our customers like.
All right. So managing of workflows is a critical aspect of field service. So how does your apps platform help businesses streamline their work orders and prioritize job requests more effectively than normal?
Yeah, that's a really great question. One of the nice things about Zuper is that it's very configurable and customizable, so that the software and the workflows that are defined in the software match the customer's business flow rather than asking the customer to match their business flow to the software itself. So we have the ability to define specific workflows that will be automatically followed based upon a previous step. And the customer can define these workflows themselves. It's not something that requires knowledge of coding. You don't have to be a programmer. It's very intuitive, built into the system. So, for example, let me try to give you a simple example. We can build a workflow that says when a service call is opened, the very next step in the process would be to notify the account manager for the customer that a service call has been opened for that customer. So that can happen automatically, and that's a workflow and a notification that the customers themselves can define. And then we could also define another very simple example. We can define a workflow that says once the work order, the job is completed at the customer, automatically send the customer an email thanking them for their business and giving them a summary of what was done on the service event. So those kinds of notifications and workflows can be defined, and they are very easily by the customer. Again, doesn't require coding. And once the event happens that triggers that workflow happens automatically. There's no manual intervention required. And those are very simple examples. We can build very complex workflows as well.
Not using code in building these workflows, I believe it helps the businesses do more because it removes that need for maybe highly technical staff or anything to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's entirely correct. I mean, it used to be in my prior experience, which, as I mentioned earlier, is pretty extensive. Anytime you wanted to make a change to the software of any type, you had to put in a request to the software organization. They would evaluate whether or not it makes sense for them and for other customers as well. Then they'd have to document it. They'd have to prepare the programming steps, do the programming, do the quality assurance, and finally, ultimately, after several weeks, or in most cases many months, get the desired changes to the software out to the customer. No code software enables the customer to do this themselves. They don't have to be programmers. They don't have to go to school to learn how to do it. We train them how to do it as part of our training, and it's just very intuitive. I mean, I'm not a programmer, and yesterday I sat down and wrote a pretty complex workflow myself. So it's something that the customers can do quite easily once they become just familiar with the basics of how to build a workflow, and it's all English language stuff. It's not code at all. So it makes the software very configurable, again, as I said, to suit the customer's exact needs.
So at the beginning, you mentioned scheduling and dispatching, and that's letting the businesses know whether they need more staff or they would need to reduce or optimize their operations generally. So how does Zuper facilitate this intelligent scheduling and dispatching, and what benefits does it offer in essence, or in terms of resource allocation and response times?
Sure. So let me answer that from a most basic perspective to a more complex perspective. So, first of all, Zuper, of course, already knows what technicians are available, what's their shift, what's their schedule. We know what their skills are, what have they been trained in. We know what their workload looks like today. We can see, all right, for today they have 3 calls and they have 2 hours available to take additional calls. We can look at it from a perspective of not just today, but for the whole week or for an entire month. So just having that basic data available uh, empowers the dispatchers and the managers who are assigning technicians to jobs to make intelligent decisions just based upon the knowledge that they have. So that's a very basic capability. But in addition to that, we also can present the customers with um, available time slots automatically. So when a job needs to be scheduled, we can show the user these are the available time slots in which you can schedule a job. We can refine that by saying, all right, for specific resources, in other words, if I need somebody that is skilled in replacing the anode rod in a water heater, for example, I can see which technicians have that skill, and that's a simple example, I know. But we can also see what's their schedule look like. How many time slots do they have available today or this week, for example, to do that work? So we can provide assisted scheduling as well. And we can ask the system even, please pick the most appropriate person, please pick the most appropriate time for that person and assign that person automatically. And then to be at the most extreme complex level, we can not only do the assignments automatically, but we can build the routes. So, for example, if a technician is going to visit 6 sites in one day, we automatically build the route so that the travel time is the most efficient and most cost-effective travel time. So the technician isn't driving from the east end of the city over to the west end of the city and then back to the east end of the city again. We take care of all the jobs in the east end of the city first and then move on to the west end of the city. So we can provide just very basic capabilities just based upon the knowledge that's available to the dispatcher and the manager, or we can fully automate the entire process and everything in between. It really depends on what the customer needs and how they want to operate.
When you talk about the routing and everything, it shows that the app is really, really well thought out.
Yes, yeah, it is. I've worked in field service software, the software business for field service, really literally for 30 years. And I've been at Zuper now for about 2 years, and I've been really, really impressed in my 2 years here at the depth of functionality and the speed with which new features and functions are added to the Zuper product.
Nice. So we've been talking about the technicians, the field service technicians, and the companies. So let's talk about customers now. Mm-hmm. And we know that in field service operations, building and maintaining customer relationships is really vital. So does Zuper integrate with CRM solutions?
Yeah, that's another really good question. And the answer is absolutely, definitely, positively yes. So we integrate with HubSpot, with Zoho, with Salesforce. So all of the major CRM providers we have an integration with. In fact, I would just go a step further. I would say we have extreme expertise in developing integrations. We have integrations with over 60 compatible products, including CRM, but also financial systems and invoicing systems, etc.
All right, so you just talked about financial systems and all that. So that brings us to digital payments. So how does Zuper enable the technicians to accept payments on site if necessary, and what payments are supported?
Yeah, we integrate again with some of the primary payment systems such as Stripe, and we enable therefore the technician to collect a payment in the field using a credit card, and they can swipe the credit card, collect payment for an invoice, and the information about the credit card is not maintained in Zuper, so there's no security risk for people using Zuper to process payments. The information about the credit card is fully maintained in the payment system, totally separate from Zuper. But to even back up a step, we also create invoices. So we can create invoices within the Zuper app itself and therefore collect payment for that invoice on the spot. So as soon as a job is completed, we can create the invoice, and we can collect payment for the invoice. And to back up even a step further, we can also create quotes. So if the field service technician goes on site, let's say that a garage door needs to be repaired at a consumer's house. I mention that because mine had to be repaired yesterday. The technician can provide a quote to the customer. This is how much it's going to cost. We can get approval from the customer on the mobile device. We can turn that quote into a work order, then a job to actually do the work. Once the work is done, we can then turn that work into the details of that work into an actual invoice, and then we can collect payment. We can do all of that in one smooth process on site at the customer facility.
Nice.
Yeah,
really nice.
It's very well thought out, as you mentioned, and very very easy to use in the field, I would add.
All right, so let's talk about scalability, customization. I know you mentioned that you can integrate with a lot of other software and everything. And apart from that, is Zuper compatible? What size of business is it compatible with? Larger or smaller or all?
The answer is yes. So we started out as a company focusing primarily on small businesses. We're much more focused now on the SMB space, the small and mid-sized businesses. But we also have some very large customers, names that you would certainly recognize that are worldwide customers. We have customers in over 14 countries. We have over 350 customers now live on Zuper, and they run the gamut from very small mom and pop shops, if you want to think about it that way, that do residential landscaping services, all the way up to companies that maintain very, very sophisticated manufacturing equipment, and companies that do a lot of work for consumers, putting together furniture and that kind of thing on a worldwide basis.
All right. So then, for another thing, for businesses who start up, like you said, they start with small businesses. For businesses who start up with Zuper and probably they grow really fast, are there options to accommodate that scaling of the business in the app?
Yeah, absolutely. There is no limit. There's no physical limit to the number of users that we can have on Zuper. There's no physical limit to the number of field service technicians that can use the mobile app. And we often have customers that start out with a handful or maybe a dozen or so technicians. And as their business grows, their number of technicians grow, and we can easily add those technicians. And obviously, the license fees can be adjusted based upon the number of people that are using the system. So if you start out with 25 people and you're paying a license fee for 25 people, but over 2 years your business grows to 80 people, then we gradually adjust the license fees to accommodate the 80 people. But the key point here is that there is nothing required of Zuper to make any changes to accommodate the larger staff other than adding the names of the people to the user base in the database.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So one other thing that's important in every business is reporting, data analytics, and measuring all the data and everything. So what reporting and analytics features does Zuper offer, and how can businesses use this data to improve their operations?
Yeah, that's also a really good question, and you've hit on a very, very important point. The data is extremely crucial, especially as you're growing, especially if you're a large organization and you really need to do a lot of analysis of the data that's gathered in the field. So we, as I've alluded to previously, we gather an enormous amount of data. We gather data about how much time is spent working on products. We gather data about how much travel time is involved. We gather data about all the costs that are involved, all the revenue that is involved. And so it's very easy. We provide at least a few dozen reports out of the box that the customers can download and customize, if you will, to their own requirements in terms of graphs, etc. So the data that we gather is very, very comprehensive, and customers can also use analytic tools to download the data and analyze the data and develop trend lines and spot trends to make corrections, etc. But the real key is the data that we gather, and it's very, very comprehensive data about anything and everything that happens in the field in providing service to a customer. And one of the examples I talked about earlier is perhaps gathering some data about how much time and how much cost is expended in servicing a specific piece of equipment, for example. And if you identify that that piece of equipment is costing a lot more than average for other similar pieces of equipment, that data can be gathered, analyzed, and reported back to the manufacturing and engineering people so that they can develop an engineering change as appropriate. And then that engineering change can be deployed in the field using the field service team that is managed by the Zuper application. So that's just one example, but we can also track the efficiency of the field service technicians. So, for example, if you have a technician in one part of the state, for example, that is performing very, very well and resolving problems on types of equipment rapidly, and you have another technician in another part of the state that is working on the same type of equipment but is not performing as well in terms of the time to resolve the problem, then you can identify that perhaps that technician needs some additional training. Maybe he or she needs some additional mentoring so that you can bring that technician up to speed and bring them on par with the other technicians that are doing better. Or worst case, if he or she just can't be trained, then it's time to replace them with somebody else. So those are just a couple of examples of the data that is gathered that can be downloaded, analyzed, and you can then make decisions. I should also mention that we've also recently introduced some artificial intelligence capabilities. And we use artificial intelligence actually in the scheduling and routing that I described earlier. But we've also introduced some artificial intelligence analytical capabilities for the other data that we gather in the system, such as maintenance details, maintenance data on a particular piece of machine, or maintenance data on a particular technician or for a particular territory. All kinds of information that can be analyzed and reported upon using our new analytics capability, artificial intelligence capabilities as well.
All right, that's interesting. So looking ahead, what trends do you foresee in the field service industry, and how is Zuper preparing to address these trends? I know you've mentioned implementing AI in the routing and everything. So,
yeah, I think as I started to say, I think it's pretty obvious to everyone that artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities are going to begin to play a more and more important role in delivering service, in helping technicians identify what is the underlying cause of a problem, so that they can correct it more speedily and more accurately. The ability to get remote support when a technician is on site, for example, and needs some help. There are technologies available now that will allow for augmented reality so that a more experienced technician, can literally look over your shoulder, so to speak, and guide you through the process of identifying a problem and the steps to correct a problem. So I think there is going to be a huge emphasis going forward on adding these new technical capabilities to the systems and processes that customers currently have and that software vendors currently provide. We did a study recently. We hired a consulting firm to do a study on the state of field service. And one of the things that it uncovered is that although many companies are pretty far down the path with digital transformation, there are many companies that still are not. So there's still a huge opportunity for a lot of companies to engage in digital transformation and begin to employ and deploy these types of technologies. even those customers that consider themselves pretty far down the path with digital transformation, by their own admission, are not taking full advantage of all of the capabilities that are available, even in basic systems like Zuper still. So they may be using Zuper and other applications to manage work orders pretty effectively, but as far as doing other things like invoicing and quotes and data analytics, they still have a ways to go. And the study revealed that many companies still feel that they haven't taken full advantage of all the technologies that are available today and that are coming down the pike. So I think digital transformation, adding additional digital capabilities and additional functionality is going to continue to be a trend going forward.
Would you like to leave some parting advice behind for business owners in the field service industry on how they can stay ahead as the industry keeps changing?
Yeah, I have two suggestions to make. One is to evaluate where you are with regard to deploying technology and make sure that you are taking advantage of all the technologies that are becoming available and that are available today. If you haven't taken advantage of those, put together a budget and put a plan together to implement these technologies such as Zuper, so that you can begin to realize the benefits and the value that the technology will provide. So I think part of my answer is take advantage of the technologies, look around, see what's available, and make sure that you put a plan in place to implement those technologies or to expand your use of those technologies if you already have them. My second piece of advice, and this is something we promote at Zuper very heavily, is a concept called completed service work. And what completed service work means, for example, is that when your technician is done working on a job, in other words, let's say a technician is assigned to go fix I'll go back to one example I used earlier, a lathe machine, a metal cutting device in a manufacturing plant. When the technician is finished working on that piece of equipment, the next thing the technician should do is think about, what would the customer want to know next? What other questions might the customer have? Is there some information that I can provide to the customer that would be helpful to them in doing their job? So completed service work means when you're done with the work that you've been assigned, you're not done with your work yet. Your work is only done when you anticipate the customer's next question, the next need, the next thing that they might want to know, or the next thing that you could tell them that would help them. That's what we call completed service work. And what we're trying to do is encourage people to make that concept of completed service work, part of their service culture, part of their technician's DNA, so that every time they do something for a customer, they're not just doing the work that's assigned, but they're taking an extra step to make sure that they're doing everything they can to answer all the customer's questions, to provide the customer with all the information that would be helpful, anticipate the customer's next need, and address it proactively.
That's interesting. And we've had a really amazing discussion. Those were two really good pieces of advice, as I'm sure if any field service company applies, it will take them really, really far.
Yeah, I think so. If you can apply completed service work in your day-to-day operations and everybody practices that, there is no question that you will be ahead of your competition in terms of the perception that your customers have about the service that you provide.
Definitely. All right. So as we get to the end of this, for listeners who might want to reach out to you or work with Zuper or learn more about the field service industry through maybe your podcasts, how can they reach out?
Sure, a couple things. One is my personal email. I'll give it to you. This is my work email, Michael, Michael, .Israel, Israel, just like the country, at zuper.co. And I want to emphasize it's .co, not .com. So it's Michael.Israel at Zuper, Zuper.co. And of course, our website is just simply Zuper, Zuper.co. So I would encourage people to go to the website. We have a number of podcasts that are available on the website. We have a lot of material on the website. You can book a demo through the website. You can book a free trial through the website. And of course, if anyone has any specific questions, I'm more than happy to answer them if they want to contact me directly as well.
Thank you very much for coming on the show, Michael. And all the links, everything will be added in the show notes once this episode goes live.
Well, that's great. Thank you for having me. It's really been my pleasure to be part of this podcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So for the listeners, thank you for being with us on this episode of the Tech Your Business podcast. I'm sure those of you who work with field service companies or who know people in the field service industry, I'm sure you have something. You have a couple of things you can talk to them about. So if you know anybody in this industry, share it with them. If you have a business in this industry, listen to this episode again. So till next week, when we come back with another episode of the Tech Your Business podcasts, don't forget to keep taking your business. Bye for now.